Is this okay, Lopa?
Yeah.
Hi, Rahul.
We're streaming live. Should we start?
Sure. Sure, we can.
Hi, Shantanu.
Hi, Ravi.
Hi, Jayat. Hi, Amin.
Hi Ravi, hi Shantanu, how are you doing?
Hi, Ajit.
Sabko namaste.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Hello and welcome to this panel discussion forum to focus on nurturing talent in social purpose organizations. My name is Lopa Mudra. I lead the Dissemination and Publication Center at ISDM. During this convening today, we will hear from leaders of social purpose organizations and ecosystem experts on various dimensions of talent practices, challenges, and recent trends in the domain of talent management. We will also look at specific takeaways that the talent management study has afforded for all of us, particularly from the case study series on different organizations. We have assigned around 40 to 50 minutes for members of the panel to respond to some questions and areas of inquiry. There'll be 20 minutes towards the end of the panel to have members of the panel respond to questions from audience members. Let me begin the discussion today by laying context and sharing some details about the talent management study. Organizational talent constitutes a make or break asset in social purpose organizations due to the complex structure, nature of work, and inherent uncertainty associated with these organizations. The skill, quality, values, motivation, and satisfaction of our people and talent in SPOs affect the work that we are ultimately able to do to address urgent humanitarian and planetary challenges. As the social sector moves towards professionalizing its work and strengthening the discourse of development management for tangible and scalable impact, it is only in the fitness of things that the leaders, decision makers, donors, and representatives of the sector together amplify and enroll best practices for themselves and their organizations. The talent management study has effectively recorded surveys, interviews, salary benchmarks, and details on motivational factors from more than 100 organizations from across the sector in India. The talent management study was a collaborative effort involving teams at the Center for Social Impact and Philanthropy, CSIP, and ISDM, together with execution partners, including Conferry, Satwa, and GuideStar. The study was supported by the A.T.E. Chandra Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Citibank, and the Rohini Lininkari Philanthropies. We have added the link to the study page on chat for easy access to reports, flyers, and cases for those who have joined the discussion today. I'll move on quickly to introduce the panel that we have today. We have with us Ajit Sivaram. Ajit is co-founder of UNI, one of India's fastest growing volunteer-driven charities, with over 15,000 volunteers across 39 cities in India. Satish and Ajit lead a new generation of change makers passionate about providing quality education to students from underprivileged backgrounds and shelter homes. An alumnus of St. Stephen's, New Delhi, and Hillsong Leadership College, Sydney, Ajit is passionate about leadership, social change, and helping people achieve their fullest potential. Having led volunteer movements for the last 20 years, Ajit understands how to influence without authority and motivate people to go above and beyond for a cause. Thank you, Ajit, for joining us today. We also have with us Rahul Balakrishnan. Thanks, Ajit. Rahul is a co-founder at Arthan. Arthan is a social enterprise committed to strengthening the impact sector ecosystem. Arthan works with social organizations to build their capability and excellence in the areas of human capital, organizational development, and thought leadership. In the past decade, Rahul has worked in the HR, training, and sales verticals with ICICI Prudential and later with the recruitment vertical at a leading educational nonprofit, Teach for India. Rahul holds a graduate degree in commerce from Delhi University and a master's degree in business administration specializing in marketing and sales management from XLRI Jamshedpur. Thank you for joining us today, Rahul.
Thank you.
We also have on the panel Ravi Sridharan. Ravi is president and founder at ISDM and has been mentor and advisor to hundreds of ISDM's alumni and several social purpose organizations in India and abroad. Ravi worked for 24 years in the corporate sector, most of which was at HSBC. At HSBC, Ravi worked as the regional marketing head for Middle East and Africa, head of consumer products for Asia Pacific, consumer banking head of Indonesia, CEO and president director of Bank Economy, a local bank in Indonesia, which was later acquired by HSBC. He quit his corporate career and switched to the social sector in 2011 and joined Azim Premji Foundation, where he was the head of education, leadership and management. Ravi is an alum of IIT and IIM Ahmedabad. Thank you, Ravi, for being at the panel today.
Thank you.
We also have with us Amin Charles. Amin is the founder and director at Community Development Center, a social purpose organization based in Madhya Pradesh. Amin has a postgraduate in sociology and a Bachelor of Arts. He has been working and leading programs and implementation at several social purpose organizations at the grassroots in the last 15 years. He has been part of several research studies and impact assessment exercises and has published papers on allied domains as part of his work. He was also keenly part of relief efforts during and post-pandemic. Thank you, Amin, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Also on the panel today is Shantanu Menon. Shantanu is currently a consultant at ISDM's Knowledge and Research Center. In fact, he was ISDM's first research associate when the team was established in 2018, a role he took on following completion of the PGP in Development Leadership, as it was called then, as a student in ISDM's first batch of 2017-18. He joined the PGP program following several volunteering stints at various education and environmental conservation organizations while backpacking around India and South Africa in 2017. Feeling the need to understand Indian civil society in more depth, especially around the issues related to environment, he joined the PGP program at ISDM. He holds a master's degree in aerospace engineering, and Shantanu has been leading the conceptualization and execution of all the case studies as part of the Talent Case series. Thank you, Shantanu, for joining the panel today.
Thanks, Lopa.
Thanks. We'll dive directly into the questions and the discussions, if that's okay. I think I'll start with Rahul from Arthan. So Rahul, what according to you are the key trends in talent from the demand and supply perspective for the social impact sector? Arthan, of course, is privy to observing these trends from the perspective of job seekers as well as the talent pool and from the organization's perspective. So we'd like to kick this off with your inputs, Rahul.
Thank you, Lopamudra. So, talking from the perspective of supply and demand, if you ask any leadership member of any not-for-profit or any social impact organization, they'll say, we aren't able to find the right people. But if you meet the most motivated individuals out there who want to create an impact in the social impact space, they will say there aren't enough jobs. So I think the biggest challenge that the social impact sector is facing right now is how can we bridge this gap between the two wide ends of the spectrum? And yes, we created Arthan to kind of bridge that gap. And there are so many institutions like ISDM here, which is trying to bridge that gap through a great program of 1 year to enable young people to make that move into the social impact space. There are various methods like you and I is doing with respect to volunteering. But I still feel there is a lack of clarity on both sides of the spectrum when it comes to how can I create impact through my roles on a daily basis? That's what an average job seeker asks. And on the other side of the spectrum, organizations are unaware of where we can find the right pool of talent for every level and every kind of role that they would be hiring for. Um, at the same time, there is a lack of clarity at the end of the job seeker where they don't know that what is exactly an organization looking for when they are hiring for certain kinds of people. And there are a lot of words being thrown around, right? Passion or drive for the social impact space, or ability to move mountains or work in a frugal manner. You'll hear these words even on JDs, but it's very difficult for an average layman to break it down. And a lot of times, a strong talent may not go that next step because they feel there are so many barriers to entry for this beautiful sector, which is social impact sector. At the same time, I think organizations have multiple issues too. There are not many organizations which has a robust people function. If you have an HR team as a not-for-profit institution today, you are lucky. Or at the same time, you are well funded to be able to afford one. But in most cases, if not in all cases, social impact organizations have founders who are pseudo fundraisers, pseudo HR managers, culture, people function leaders, everything under the sun is being managed by the founders themselves or the C-level executives. So when it comes to the crux, how can I find the best talent in the least possible time? So what happens is you tend to cut corners, right? If I am into education, the best way to find the best talent is to find someone who is already working in education, which already creates a barrier of entry for people who are not from education. I'm just using education sector as an example here. And over the past 3 years, climate has become a very important focus area. We are now more concerned about the world we live in, the air we are breathing, especially if you are in a city like Delhi, NCR. And we don't have educational courses with respect to it as a focus area. There aren't enough ready-made talent when it comes to climate. And I'm just talking from a perspective of an organization. How do I filter out the right people for the roles that I have? So I think the deep analysis of, if I have to use one word, is lack of clarity on both sides of the spectrum. And hopefully through forums like these, what we are having right now, and these dialogues will propel more and more people to make that step forward.
Great. Thanks, Rahul. I think I'll circle to Ravi for response to the same question, Ravi, on the key trends in talent from both the demand and supply perspective, particularly from ISDM, from the hat that you wear at ISDM, also as mentor, founder, mentor to lots of alumni, advisor to lots of SPOs, etc. So if we can have your input.
Sure, Lopa. But let me start by saying it's a little disappointing to sit in a group of only men on a panel. And that's I know we had a lady who was supposed to join, but she couldn't. I had once vowed that I will not join a panel that doesn't have women, but today I seem to have got into one only because she dropped out, and I know it was a medical emergency. So, but yeah, coming to the question itself, one of the things that one sees, which is an opportunity and a worry from an organization side, is professionalizing of leadership and management. And I'm giving you the ISDM perspective. Now, the good thing is that we're beginning to recognize you need specialization if you want to build, scale. You need to build organizational capabilities and so on and so forth. The danger is you corporatize the social sector. So, how do you bring in management that is humane, that is appropriate for the social sector? So I think that's one big trend, if you like, that's happening. And also it's influenced by the funding. Increasingly, the money coming into the sector is coming from money having been made in the world of business, from earlier days when it came from multilateral agencies. So I think one of the big things that NGOs need to watch out for is you do need to professionalize leadership and management, but God forbid, please don't ever corporatize the social sector, because that's the worst thing that you can do to the social sector. The other thing is the founder syndrome collapsing. I think if I went back even a decade or so, every organization had the stamp of the founder all over it. I think increasingly organizations are becoming organizations represented by multiple people with caliber, with passion, with abilities, and so on and so forth. And I think that's a great sign from an organization's perspective. From an organization's perspective, increasingly, I mean, just to take ISDM itself, we have a chief people management officer, we have a chief technology officer. Yes, we're fortunate and privileged to get funding, but the fact is organizations are beginning to recognize the need, like Rahul also said, for these kind of areas, to invest in, to give importance to people management, to give importance to technology, to give importance to behavior change, and so on and so forth. So I can see new skills. And if I just fast forward ahead a little bit, and I know ISDM is again setting up centers of excellence on data sciences, social finance. I'm imagining the future generation of people working in the social sector will be data scientists, will be finance wizards, will be marketing experts or behavior change experts, and so on and so forth, but dedicated for the social sector, right? Not what we, like I said, see in the corporate world. I also think that one is beginning to see the value of running organization. And now I'm coming in from a funder's perspective, not like corporates, but like a microcosm of a society that you aspire for. You can't be working for equality and run a hierarchical organization, or you can't be working for empowerment and then don't believe in the agency of people. So I can see those cultures sort of changing. And this is, all from the organization side. I think the more important point is from the talent side. And, especially with ISDM, where we've seen 300 plus alums come out of our institute and go out there and work and come back and, rave about what they do, cry about what they do, and so on and so forth. The one thing one sees is that, and this is a huge piece of optimism for me, is that the new generation is far more willing to work in the social sector than the previous generations were. And that might be just a function of the progress, the economic progress, and maybe it's a Maslow's hierarchy thing. But I definitely see that the new generation are very, very committed to working in the social sector. And as all of us know, that the new generation is also very upset about the society the previous generation has left behind for them in terms of climate, in terms of, the inequality, in terms of the social sort of, unacceptabilities, and so on and so forth. So I think that's a great news, but the thing we must recognize is what are they looking for in their jobs? And I think the new generation is looking for meaningful engagement. I mean, salary is important, and I'll come to that in a minute, but they're looking for meaningful, purposeful engagement. And that's why they're there. I mean, otherwise they might as well go and get a high paid job or whatever it is that, they could have got. They get inspired by organizations that demonstrate integrity, fairness, respect, dignity, collaboration. These are things that this generation really gets inspired for. They may not be vociferous and, talk about it that much, but, their legs do the talking. They just leave organizations and just move on, right? The third thing is that the new generation and maybe we should also talk about COVID at some point, are also the type who are increasingly becoming new age workers, right? Post-COVID, the kind of working styles, the kind of, gig work or technology-based work or remote work or whatever it is. And I think it's important for us not to be stuck like an ostrich in the ways we ran organizations 20 and 10 years ago, but try and involve the youngsters in designing your organization processes and talent management processes, and thereby sort of, make it welcoming, make it exciting, make it worth their while to work in the social sector, because the passion is already there. They are coming with, sort of a restlessness for the, to change the current situation and things like that. And the last thing I am seeing is that a lot of youngsters want to go in for higher education to come into the sector. Earlier, you graduated and out of your passion, you started your NGO, you joined somebody or whatever. But now increasingly, I'm finding that people want to study, whether it is, hospital or public health or leadership and management or education or gender. And I think those are all really, really nice things.
Thanks, Ravi, and thanks, Rahul. I think gives a lot of insights and a lot of food for thought for quite a few of us. I think we'll get to different modes of engaging talent, and I'd like to frame my next question for Ajit. We'd like you to perhaps share a little bit about volunteers as an important talent pool in the sector, what the trends are that you and I have seen in the sector with respect to volunteer and engagement or challenges. And just as context, like I said when I was introducing Ajit, that UNI has a really robust volunteer engagement model. And we'd really like, Ajit, for you to share your learnings or, patterns, etc. from that.
Yeah, I think Ravi touched on a couple of these pieces. I think this generation definitely wants to be actively involved in the social sector, right? Whether it's from volunteering, and we've seen, from our volunteers, a lot of our volunteers, actually, whatever their degree is, they go on to do a master's in social work, or even go abroad and do a master's in a socially sort of minded course. So there is a lot of openness to the social sector, not just from a volunteering, but I see volunteering almost like a gateway to, hey, taste the social sector and then get involved. Because once you touch and feel and actually sit with a child, work with a child for a year, or work in the environment space for a year, you really understand grassroots problems. And I think sometimes that shifts, right? That shifts something in a person that then they actually want to go forward and do more than just volunteer. So when we think of volunteering in the sector, definitely in the last 10 years, we've seen a huge uptake. Now you've got a actual volunteering sort of little part of the universe of the social sector, volunteer-based NGOs, Bhumi, Make a Difference, UNI, I Volunteer, all of that. And you can definitely see, not just thousands, but tens of thousands of people actually volunteering. You've had your NSS and those sort of more club-based volunteering before that. But here you're getting to see what people give 2, 5, 10 hours a week, even long term. The other thing that definitely has seen a huge uptake in the last probably 4-5 years, saw a huge jump during COVID, is corporate volunteering also, right? They tend to give sort of shorter periods of time, so they can engage 2 to 4 hours in a month or every quarter. But we found in college students, they're able to give sizable amounts of time. For example, when we go to like a Mount Carmel, 1,200 students in the first year of Mount Carmel College, if we talk to them, at least about 700 sign up to be a volunteer. And this is to being a volunteer 2.5 hours a week for 9 months. So it's not just a come clean a park kind of volunteering, it's long-term volunteering. And about 700 who sign up, actually about 150 actually get in the program and volunteer. So those are good numbers. You're saying 10% of all of Mount Carmel first years are actively volunteering every week, are great numbers, and of their own volition, right? This isn't mandated by the college or anything of that sort. So definitely echo what Ravi said, huge, huge uptake. And I think from the NGO side, if they can match the cause with something young people are passionate about, and if they can learn how to build a community around volunteers. So we've got about 100+ communities of volunteers across India and 40 cities today, and we've intentionally built volunteer communities. They volunteer together, they're friends together, and we've built those communities. And then figuring out here within those communities, can each person play a critical role? So we define roles for each person, define a volunteer journey. They're almost like, we treat them like staff. We treat them like full-time talent. So they have an orientation, an interview, the whole shebang. We create rituals, rhythms for them, all of that. So just structuring that, if NGOs do well, volunteers are a huge base to leverage and sort of a great space to work in also.
Oh, great. Thanks, Ajit. I think from volunteering as a sort of gateway to the sector or engagement with talent, I think we'd now like to check with Amin, because, CDC works with the tribal community in Bega, MP. And, I'm sure that there must be some very unique insights on talent management, people management for CDC. And we'd particularly perhaps like you to talk to us about, how CDC and your organization include community representatives in your program, and that as a resource pool as earlier panelists were talking about, or when working with young people from the local areas, etc., or either as employees or volunteers. Just wanted to get some insights and inputs from that.
Okay. Speaking in Hindi. It is,
Yes, of course.
okay. Because it is easy for me to explain my views. हम जिस तरीके से काम कर रहे हैं, मतलब हम जो आप लोगों की बातें हैं, ये डिपेंड है कि आपका काम
Amin, I think there's a problem with
सुनाई नहीं दे रहा।
network. आपके नेटवर्क में, या पता नहीं, हमको कट कट के आवाज आ रही है आपकी।
सुनाई नहीं दे रहा अमीन। Maybe if Amin switches his video off, he might sound better.
Yeah, perhaps. Amin, शायद अगर आप oh, he's dropped off. I think we'll put a pin on that question, and we'd move on. And when he joins back,
Amin is back.
Oh, is he back? Yeah.
अभी आ रहा?
हाँ, ये बेटर है अमीन भाई।
हाँ।
ओके, ठीक है। तो हम सीडीसी जिस तरीके से जिन कम्युनिटी के साथ और जिस स्केल पे काम कर रहा है, तो हमारी जो जरूरतें हैं उस हिसाब से हम देखते हैं। तो हमें लोकल कम्युनिटी के साथ काम करने के
अमीन, आप जब वीडियो ऑन कर रहे हैं आपका आवाज चला जा रहा है।
अमीन, आप वीडियो ऑफ ही रखें, आई थिंक उससे हमको क्लियरली सुनाई देगा।
Look, the admin should be able to switch off his video also.
Yeah, admin. Okay, I think we'll circle back to that. Is he still here? Yeah.
अमीन भाई,
अभी
हाँ जी, अब आप सुनाई दे रहे हैं।
जी। तो सॉरी, पता नहीं क्यों, शायद नेटवर्क इशू है क्या। तो हम जिस तरीके से कम्युनिटी के साथ और जिन कम्युनिटी के साथ हम काम कर रहे हैं, तो हम कोशिश ये करते हैं कि हमारे लोकल यूथ को ही, या लोकल जो भी है उसको इन कामों में जोड़ा जाए। जरूर, और कुछ हमारी थोड़ी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की पॉलिसी है या हमारे अपने विचार भी हैं कि हम जो स्थानीय लोग हैं, हम थोड़ा उनको महत्व देते हैं। हम उनके ऊपर रिसोर्सेस है या जो भी समय है वो खर्च करते हैं, क्योंकि हमारा ये मानना है कि बाहर के लोगों को इसमें टैलेंट या और किसी चीज की बात नहीं है कि हम लाके अगर हम उनको एम्प्लॉय करेंगे किसी काम के लिए, तो ये सब चीज डिपेंड करता है प्रोजेक्ट्स के ऊपर। और रिसोर्सेस अगर नहीं है तो फिर वो, मतलब जिस दिन प्रोजेक्ट खत्म होता है उस दिन पूरा स्टाफ चला जाएगा। लेकिन जब हम लोकल यूथ्स को इन्वॉल्व करते हैं तो हमारे लिए ज्यादा संभावना होती है कि वो वहीं पे रहेंगे, और कुछ और विकल्प भी मिल जाते हैं। और जितना उनके ऊपर जितना रिसोर्सेस उनको खर्च किया गया है, जितना उनके लिए उन्हें जो ट्रेनिंग दी गई है, तो वो अपने कम्युनिटी में उसका उपयोग हमेशा करते रहें। और जिस तरीके की इंफॉर्मेशन है, जो नॉलेज है, और ये एकदम से होता नहीं है। मतलब जिस तरीके से जिन कम्युनिटी से जिन यूथ को हम लोग लेते हैं, तो उनके ऊपर काफी समय लगता है, रिसोर्सेस लगते हैं, और उनका स्किल डेवलप करना, उनका कम्युनिकेशन बेहतर बनाना, उनमें नॉलेज बढ़ाना, तो ये हमको मदद करता है कि लंबे समय तक हम उस कम्युनिटी के साथ काम कर सकें। और ये कम्युनिटी के साथ जुड़ाव के लिए भी काफी मदद करता है, क्योंकि एक आउटसाइडर जो भी स्टाफ होगा, टैलेंट बहुत हो सकते हैं, लेकिन जो स्थानीय लैंग्वेज है, ट्रेडिशन है, कल्चर है, कम्युनिटी के बीच में रहने की जो उनके साथ में रह के काम करने की जो चीजें हैं, तो ये सब चीजें थोड़ा आसान हो जाती है जब हम स्थानीय यूथ को या स्थानीय लोगों को साथ में लेके काम करते हैं।
थैंक यू अमीन, बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग insights थे. I think it's now, I'd like now to address the elephant in the room, which is what I think Ravi and Rahul spoke about, and Ajit also mentioned, about the pandemic. And I'd like all the panelists perhaps to respond to how, I mean, in what ways has the pandemic changed the dynamics within the SPO ecosystem? How do you see the pandemic having redefined and shaped the talent landscape for the sector, both from the perspective of personnel as well as organizations? We can start with whoever's up. Ajit, perhaps, since you already did mention a lot about volunteers during the pandemic.
Cool. Yeah, I think a couple of broad shifts which have not been just, I think for our industry, it's every sector definitely is the introduction of remote work, right? I think that even just by doing this, remote work is added a huge amount of flexibility. So I think that is a huge now, what is almost now what we're saying hybrid work. For us, even all of our staff were hybrid. The entire team actually meets twice a year for an entire week. So that's 2 weeks in a year. So hybrid work, I think, is a big part. But I can also see a big push, especially among the younger, the younger staff. So them in their 20s, they want to come back and be in person. Definitely see that. A huge shift in digital skills being of high value, even in our sector. I think that's definitely a big piece. Flexibility now, right? A lot of what were our HR policies, which were set in stone, suddenly went out of the window in a week. You know, and I think that is another piece. A couple of other pieces which we've seen is, you know, our sector has been through a lot of up and downs in the last year, from being in high demand during COVID to sort of what we've seen is post-COVID. There was this, everyone had sort of put their lives on hold during COVID. So everyone's more or less stayed in the same jobs, didn't go, a lot of people did not go and study during COVID. So what we saw is after COVID, which was sort of 21, 22-ish, life resumed. So people were then going and applying for new places, new jobs, etc. So yes, that's one thing which we definitely saw one wave of huge attrition after COVID also. Yeah,
Great, thanks, Ajit. Anyone who'd like to go next? Shantanu, Amin, Ravi, Rahul.
I think, thank you, Jit. I think adding to what you just said, I think, yes, a lot of times the old systems and practices which used to kind of gain prominence, right from the hiring practices to retaining practices, have changed. Organizations have now figured out ways to work with people irrespective of maybe not even meeting them for a while. There are more flexibility with respect to policies, both around work from home, work from office, but also around leaves that were never thought of before. I think I have also seen a huge behavioral change in especially leaders and founders, that you tend to prioritize and use time better, because now you realize that you don't need to do a meeting for everything. You tend to kind of prioritize certain things over another, which kind of goes from top to down and ensures that everyone in the organization now starts building onto that practice. Technology and usage of technology, CRMs, softwares is gaining prominence, because that helps move the needle when it comes to helping organizations achieve operational efficiency, which means how can we get better than Excel? if there are better ways than Microsoft Excel, can we explore that? Why do we need to do a meeting to take updates from everyone? Can there be a Slack which gives people live updates on how progress of work is happening across streams of work, irrespective to the fact that how big or small you are as an organization? And I think even from an human capital lens, appraisals, automation with respect to leave, there are so much usage of technology we are seeing across the board. Um, even for survey and a lot of programmatic challenges that organizations used to face, big organizations would invest a lot on people to go on the field and take physical surveys. I think technology has helped organizations also look at it from a different lens. What can I use? Organizations are using WhatsApp as a key lever to get surveys of women who are using technology, or even nurses in rural India hospitals and clinics. I was just speaking to someone yesterday who said last week in UP they used WhatsApp as a key mode to connect to the end user, which would have never been thought of pre-pandemic, I'm assuming. You would have invested, maybe hired thousands of people to take those surveys. So I'm not saying it is error free, but I'm still thinking that that was exactly what social impact sector also needed in a very positive way. And I hope there are these things we don't let them go just because masks are out. We can move freely now. And I see there is a digression to that because a lot of organizations are reverting back to 5 days working week in office. There are layoffs happening in many institutions, not necessarily in social impact, but even in ed tech and a lot of these organizations where being in Bangalore or being in Delhi is compulsory, which is meaning a lot of people are losing jobs. I hope that doesn't become a norm again.
Thanks, Rahul. Ravi, yeah, please.
Yeah, sure, Lopa. I think there was a change that was happening anyways before COVID. What COVID did is to sort of, solidify it, accelerate it, and make it happen. So that's one side of it. And a lot of the things that, both Ajit and Rahul spoke about in terms of how technology is come into play, attitudes have changed, ways of working have changed. But I also want to draw attention to a couple of other things. One is that COVID made us realize that we have to know how to do things at scale, because COVID was at population scale. And suddenly you realize that you didn't have organizations that could respond to that. So you had to find ways of responding to that, whether it was a coming together of the Samaj Sarkar Bazaar, whether it was coming together of the grassroots organization, the intermediary organization, the funding organization. And there's a whole new way of working, that started happening. I mean, one huge explosion that happened was these collectives or collaboratives or whatever you want to call it, right? So suddenly there are funders who are collaborating together to pick up a big issue and work on that. Similarly, there are large groups of NGOs that are coming together. It was all obviously done initially with COVID, but today they've become, permanent sort of frameworks where organizations are working together at scale. So this whole idea of working at scale is something that has transformed the way we are working, the way we are collaborating, the way we are realizing each other's strengths and bringing all that to bear on the community and the environment and things like that. So that's one big one. The second one, which the social sector has not yet seen, but I would put my money on the fact that it's going to happen in the social sector, is something that's already happening in the world of business, in the corporate world, which, if you've been following that, is called the Great Resignation. Across the world, there's huge resignations happening. And the attitude towards resignation has changed from pre-COVID to post-COVID. Pre-COVID, you only resigned after you had a job in hand. Post-COVID, I'm not even going to wait till I have a job in hand. If I don't like a place, I'm out of here. And the things I leave places for, if you don't care for well-being, I'm out of here. Now, that's another one, which is organizations have suddenly been forced, or maybe, if not forced, at least adopt on their own, the importance of well-being. Because I think COVID has put a lot of people through a lot of distress and mental health challenges and what have you. And I think well-being has become a very important part of the whole talent construct. The other area is really this, the space of the kind of culture you create for people who want to work from home. I mean, one of the challenges we at ISDM are facing, for example, Lopa, is how do you build a culture when people don't even come to office? It's not the same thing to build culture on a screen like this. It was very different when you had conversations either in the, the pantry or the toilet or the corridors or the lift or whatever it was. Suddenly that's out. Conversations are only happening like this. And like Rahul said, on WhatsApp or Slack or whatever it is that you're using. So how do you build culture? And that's a huge talent management challenge. I think all of us need to explore and figure out how you're going to build that. And the last thing is the definition of field. Suddenly people think that I don't need to travel to the field, and obviously they don't need to because of true technology. Suddenly that connect with the field is getting lost. Increasingly, the frequency of people going to the field, I suspect is coming down. I don't have data, but I want to study that. And that's worrisome, because then we'll become these, sort of ivory towers, and we think we're connected because every day I talk to the person on the field because I can get online and do so. It's very different from sitting with that person, smelling, feeling, touching, being on the ground and things like that. And I worry that this new culture might have reduced the engagement physically with the field, and that's something that always sort of bothers me. And I think there is a serious need for organizations to have conversations involving everybody in the organization on how do we work, what culture do we build, how do we take this forward, how do we design new policies based on, for example, suddenly people are recognizing, oh my God, why should I waste 3 hours coming to work? So we have to think of new policies. Should the working hours become, instead of the usual 9 to 6, even day before yesterday, we were having this discussion at ISDM, should it be 10 to 4? Because then it allows for people to come in when it's off-peak hours. So there's many such things that one needs to really think about. And my simple submission to all NGOs is a line that we always use at ISDM, which is, culture will have strategy for breakfast. So you can have all your strategies right, but if you're not able to build the culture that you need to work, bring people together, you have no hope of, succeeding in whatever you're setting out to do. Thanks, Lopa.
Thank you. Thanks, Ravi. Amin, perhaps you'd like to throw light on pandemic and how that's really affected the space that CDC works in.
Yeah. Actually, हमारे मतलब पोस्ट प्री कोविड एंड पोस्ट कोविड जब हम अपने काम को देखते हैं तो चुनौतियां तो बहुत सारी हैं, मतलब काफी चीजें हैं। और जिस तरीके से हम लोग हमारे साथ यह है कि कुछ चीजों को तो हम अडॉप्ट कर सकते हैं, जैसे अभी जो और राहुल और श्रीधरन जी जो बोल रहे हैं कि जरूर कुछ टेक्नोलॉजी का हम लोग यूज कर रहे हैं या कर सकते हैं, लेकिन जब कम्युनिटी के साथ काम करना है तो ये पॉसिबल नहीं है कि हर चीज टेक्नोलॉजी से हो सकता है, और ये काम के नेचर के ऊपर डिपेंड करता है। आप मतलब हाई स्कूल के स्टूडेंट्स को, उन बच्चों को तो आप ऑनलाइन क्लासेस या कॉलेज में ये सब चीजें कर सकते हैं, लेकिन उन बच्चों को जो क्लास 1 क्लास 2 में है या जो स्कूल नहीं जा रहे, उनको आप रिसोर्सेस नहीं है, कनेक्टिविटी नहीं, तो इस तरीके के चैलेंजेस हैं। और अभी मतलब हम लोग जब अभी अनुभव एक्सपीरियंस कर रहे हैं कि जिस तरीके से इकोनॉमिकली जो गरीबी का जो स्तर है वो जिस तरीके से बढ़ा है, तो वो एक बड़ा चैलेंज है, और इसका सीधा सा असर मेंटल हेल्थ के ऊपर पड़ रहा है। और ये इस तरीके की चुनौतियां हैं जिसमें मतलब जरूर थोड़ी टेक्नोलॉजी का यूज करके, लेकिन फील्ड में तो स्टाफ को जाना ही होगा, बिना उसके जाए बहुत सारी चीजें नहीं हो सकती। मतलब हम लोग भी, हमने भी सुना है कि अभी हेल्थ एटीएम है और बहुत सारे डॉक्टर काउंसलिंग कर सकते हैं, लेकिन आप ये सोचिए कि उन एरिया में जहाँ पे कनेक्टिविटी नहीं, वहां पर आप हेल्थ एटीएम, या अभी बहुत गवर्नमेंट भी ये कोशिश कर रही है कि टेलीमेडिसिन का कुछ चीजें चलना शुरू हुई हैं ब्लॉक लेवल पे। कोई भी टेलीमेडिसिन सेंटर है वो बहुत अच्छे से फंक्शन नहीं कर रहा है, क्योंकि लोगों को इन सब चीजों को अडॉप्ट करने में, इन सब चीजों से फैमिलियर होने में और समय लगेगा। और मतलब एक वर्चुअल, हम लोग जिस तरीके से बात कर ले रहे हैं, लेकिन एक महिला को आप बिठा के एक स्क्रीन के सामने वो डॉक्टर के साथ अपनी समस्याओं को कैसे बताएगी, ये बहुत दिक्कत होती है। तो अलग अलग तरीके की चुनौतियां हैं। आप लोगों के स्तर पे, बड़े शहरों के स्तर पे वो अलग तरीके की संभावनाएं हैं, चुनौतियां हैं। हमारे लिए, हम लोग जो फील्ड में काम कर रहे हैं, हमारे लिए अलग तरीके की चुनौतियां हैं स्टाफ के साथ भी। और हम अगर फील्ड में नहीं जाएंगे तो शायद कुछ होगा नहीं, या हम सिर्फ जिस तरीके से लोगों के साथ जो एंगेज होना पड़ता है, तो उसमें जरूर दिक्कतें तो आती हैं। और अगर हम सिर्फ रिलीफ की ही बात करें तो उसमें भी बिना कम्युनिटी में जाए आप रिलीफ भी तो नहीं कर सकते हैं। तो
जी
बहुत ज्यादा अंतर तो नहीं है। टेक्नोलॉजी का आप यूज कर सकते हैं, लेकिन आपका जो जुड़ाव है वो तो जरूरी है।
जी, थैंक यू अमीन। बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग पर्सपेक्टिव था आपका। आई थिंक I'd like to circle the conversation to Shantanu now. Shantanu, it's really been interesting to hear about challenges and trends that the pandemic has afforded to the social impact space. Particularly to you as part of our case study series within the talent study. What, according to you, would be the top takeaways from the SPOs that we have been recording talent journeys for? And we're, for the benefit of the audience, we've done a series of 18 cases, most of which will be up soon. Some of them are already up on the talent page that my colleagues have shared the link for. So over to you, Shantanu.
Yeah, hi everyone. I will try and provide a big picture of the case studies that we've written as part of the talent study. We've written about 15 of the 18 so far on a reasonable cross-section of civil society. And these are deep dives into some of the organizations who partnered with us to kind of support and maybe nuance some of the aggregate level work that was being done as part of the wider talent study. And I think rather than saying anything categoric, I will just talk through some of the anecdotal evidence that we saw emerging in the interviews and the more detailed research that we conducted on each organization for these more deep diving cases. So what emerged is that while we started with the talent study and while the conversations we had, the interviews we conducted opened with talent, when we started actually putting these cases together, we realized that it was not possible to look at this question in isolation. It had to really be looked at within the broader context of the organization, the work they do, and more broadly, the civil society space in general. So we ended up engaging with the histories of each of these organizations, the journeys of the founders, the broader social context of when they came up, of when they came into being, and the kind of shifts that they've gone through over a period of time. And once we understood this, it was then possible for us to engage with the question of talent in a much more meaningful sense. So I think the first thing really is that in general, as far as the space is concerned, talent is not a standard commoditized word. We were fortunate enough while writing these cases that they represented three very distinct generations. We had a few organizations who started in the late 70s and 80s, whose contexts were dominated by an India that was just coming out of the emergency. Some who came up in the 90s and the turn of the millennium, close on the heels of liberalization. And then those that came up around 2009-10 onwards, when the influence of things like digital technology had vastly expanded. So we have this almost 45-year time span that these cases cover, and three very broad, very different socio-political contexts. Now, what we found was when these cases were grounded in a deeper exploration of this background, that this context itself was influencing the people question. So interestingly, the word itself could be seen shifting between these generations, whereas the early ones referred to it mostly as people. The closer one got to our present day time frame, phrases like HR and talent became much more prominent in the natural vocabulary of organizations. But while the labels do change, underlying this, what has really continued to stay the same over all this time is the passion, the intensity, and the values of, for example, founders. And that continues to stand out. But while motivations at the founder level continue to be a uniting force in some senses, almost all our organizations that we've worked with so far acknowledge that getting people to come to stay for a period of time and to work at these cost structures that they're able to provide is without doubt difficult. What was called out explicitly by almost maybe 50% of all these organizations is that the nature of funding has changed dramatically, and it has adversely affected the ability to build or nurture people within the organization. The biggest change has been the increasing projectization of work, but because issues continue to remain complex and long range and demand a long-term, thoughtful, strategic response around which then one can build a team and an organization with certain expertise and competencies to suit that, this increasing fragmentation of work under projects has meant that while deliverables are still getting produced, possibly better than ever before, people are not getting nurtured. Organizations internally are not necessarily being built up. So while motivation, compensation all came out as hugely important factors, our experience of going in depth with this group of organizations also indicated that with regards to the question of people, perhaps what is as foundational is getting that space to really build organizations, finding ways to really encourage that and really allowing that to thrive, because that space appears to have significantly shrunk over time, and in turn does have an adverse impact on an organization's ability to nurture its people. Now, the notion of talent itself, we noticed across these organizations had not that much to do with degrees and qualifications, but so much of it was down to the ability of an individual to engage with another or with an issue in an intense, empathetic way. With CDC, for example, as Aminji said, the sheer gravity of the context that the grassroots community-based cadre of talent is acutely aware of, or with you and I, this palpable through and through emphasis on empathy, which means that, more than 2,000 talented young people can come through their doors each year and really give it their all. So often it's a very small number of really core things that allows talent to maintain that underlying connect, especially as civil society becomes a more amorphous entity with so many new ideas, approaches, and a new generation of talent that has to kind of take all that in. That really underlying sense of connection can get eroded, and it becomes important to find those one or two powerful things that really underpins an organization's existence and its purpose, and keeping talent acutely aware of and connected to that on a day-to-day basis. There seems to be a real value to grounding one's people in these very foundational questions about the organization. How did we come to be this way? Why is it that we do what we do? That kind of thing can provide a valuable recentering for talent that today can get caught up in the day-to-day or in delivering a particular project or trying to implement a specific approach. It can provide this valuable pause of, this is why I'm here and this is why I can continue to be here. Also, the idea of saying that talent is what is inside the organization and has a salary attached to it, a very, what one might call a textbook definition of the term, is one side of the story. But in the journeys of a lot of these organizations, what we see is that it has been the almost, invisible person within the structure who has shouldered and continues to shoulder much of the organization's weight. And a lot depends on their ingenuity, their empathy, their ability to connect with communities, their integrity, so much more so than qualifications or skills, which are very important, but in some ways secondary. So where exactly an organization draws its boundaries of what constitutes talent, and it may not be the most obvious definition, but what gets called out is that it's important to deeply understand where the real but perhaps hidden value is coming from within an organization, or what the kind of subsurface qualities are that an organization might really need from its people, but which may only become obvious within the deeper context and history of that organization. And really then, talent often emerges unexpectedly. It might not just be what is available on the job market, but what really is acquired by and then emerges from a person who is able to be connected to and stay within a particular structure and the context for a period of time. Because they are allowed to really understand the work and given the opportunity to learn about the context, they can often outmatch in terms of sheer value to an organization, someone who might appear to be a very strong hire on paper. So this is something we could clearly feel. We haven't written about it explicitly all the time, but there is this clear sense of the word talent as we might ordinarily be accustomed to it. And then talent as this set of attributes that emerge within an organizational context that cannot necessarily be codified or standardized, but is kind of implicitly embodied within certain people. And nurturing people within an organization's context as part of overall talent management can often throw up unexpected, sometimes happy surprises, where a group of people who are already within the organization can kind of effectively and quite organically emerge as being extremely high value to the work and to the organization. So I don't want to take up too much more time. I think on that note, I will hand over to Lopa.
Thanks, Shantanu. Thank you. That was really insightful, and it's great summation to the larger talent case study series. I think we've kind of overrun the time we had for direct questions to the, inputs from the panel. So I think in the fairness of things, I already see one question in the Q&A section. If it's okay with all panelists, should we just cut to some Q&A and perhaps I'm assuming that a lot of the Q&A will cover more areas of inquiry. If we can, there was a question by Pallavi Vagle. Can we have her ask the question? Pallavi, if you can ask your question directly.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my question was relating to the, implication of COVID that many of the panelists spoke about, and the fact that, it has brought about remote working, flexi working, use of technology, a lot more in organizations. But obviously, and as Amin also pointed out, it's not something that's possible in all organizations. Some job roles possibly can do that, whereas there'll be some job roles that cannot. And so I'm curious to know, how does a culture of an organization get built in this kind of a situation? Is there a danger of, the culture getting fragmented because of, some job roles can do that, whereas some job roles cannot?
Thanks, Pallavi. Interesting question. Yes, please, Ravi.
Pallavi, this is a $64,000 question, as they say. How do you build culture in an environment where people are not seeing each other face to face? And a lot of the, but the world is also changing, Pallavi. I'll just give you maybe a trivial example from ISDM. In the two cohorts before this, that entire batch was online. There were 3 couples that got formed, and then eventually sort of got into serious relationship, never having met each other in person. It's crazy what is happening nowadays. So I think there are 2 sides to this coin. I think there is a challenge, and the other side is we shouldn't be overwhelmed. I think there are new ways emerging also of how people build relationships, how people build culture. I don't think we've yet written books and papers on how that can be done, but I think that's a field that we will see evolving in the next few years. I can't see us going back to a 5 days, 6 days, 7 days a week routines is one thing that's becoming quite obvious. But we can't run organization without building the cultures that are required, Pallavi, like you rightly say. So I'm hoping that we will find new ways of building culture. But as we build new ways of building culture, I think we should maximize people interaction, people coming together without a doubt. There's no two things about it. Is the first sort of point that I wanted to make about this whole space of there was a second point that I wanted to make, but I have now.
Ravi, did you say you had 3 couples from online staff
without ever meeting each other?
Sorted. You're gonna get a lot of applications to ISDM to come work.
No, that wasn't a pitch.
Whether you intended it or not, now you're going to get applications. Enjoy the.
Great. We also have a question by someone.
Can I just add a bit to what Pallavi
Yes, please,
and what Palgas and Ravi shared. So I think if you just think through culture and how culture is built, right? It's built through shared values. It's built through shared rituals and rhythms. It's built through shared language, right? Now, bad culture and good culture was built before COVID and will be built after COVID. It's just that the landscape has changed. So you're playing with different Lego pieces now, right? But people sitting in office used to gossip the hell out of each other. So the fact that on a Zoom call actually reduces gossip now. So there are some pros to it. Second is we have some teams which are 100% in person. They're on field. They have no choice. Some teams which are hybrid, some teams which are remote. So we have all three within 100 people organization. So for us, the critical thing is, can I within your little within each team, so 7 to 8 members, can you build a similar culture that other teams also building? And we've tried to sort of intentionally build that by talking through our values, talking through, hey, what are some shared rhythms we can all have, some shared rituals we can all have. So every meeting at UNI, no matter which department you're in, which Zoom call you join, will start with something called good things. So it's a shared ritual we have as an organization, and it's intentional, right? Whether it's a Monday morning or a Friday evening, you will have that. So wherever, right to all 2,000 volunteers, 100 centers, we have these rituals, 5-6 rituals that we built. So then you go there and it's like seeing the same, it's like you go to any McDonald's, see the same menu, right? You're seeing what you're seeing, similar language, similar way of greeting, all of that. And that's what creates, in some sense, good culture, maybe not good culture, but the culture you want to see across your organization, right? So if you think through those pieces, you're just building those Lego blocks everywhere. And then the challenge is, how do I make that intentional, yet be organic? Then the next set of challenges will come to that.
Can I add one point?
Yes, please.
Pallavi, and that's the one that I suddenly went blank on, is that increasingly I'm finding in our organizations, people think of their individual productivity versus the collective productivity of the organization. And I think this is a conversation to be had with the individual, because people say, "Main to mera kaam ghar pe baith ke kar sakta hu." But maybe there are 5 others who need you, and unka kaam shayad nahi ho raha hai because you're not there. And that idea that we are in a collective system, and thereby it's not only ki, you're able to do your job perfectly okay. I think you have to think about the whole organization. That's why this culture becomes a very important thing. Because unless there is a culture that is built, then we don't understand what we value, what languages do we like to use, what sort of ways we treat each other, how do we, meet our commitments, and so on and so forth. So I think this conversation with people around collective good or collective efficiency versus individual efficiency is also a very important point, Pallavi.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Pallavi, and thank you, Ajit, Ravi. We have a question by an anonymous attendee. Would you like to ask it yourself, or I'll just put it out there for the panel. Could you share your perspectives on how we create more inclusive workspaces in SPOs? I don't know what DIEB as an acronym stands for, but
diversity.
DIE. Okay. Perhaps we could start with Amin responding to that, because he and CDC work a lot on that area. So Amin.
Yeah. Actually, I think I can देयर इज वन मोर क्वेश्चन, सत्येंद्र राणा। तो मैं ये दोनों को मिला के बोल देता
जी जी
हूँ।
जी।
तो एक तो मोर इंक्लूसिव वर्क प्लेस, देखिए मतलब हम लोग जो जिस तरीके से चीजों को समझते हैं, समझ रहे हैं, और मतलब क्या कैसे उसको मोर इंक्लूसिव, हमारे लिए तो यह है कि हमको कम्युनिटी के साथ जो काम करना है, तो हम तो कम्युनिटी को सामने रख के चीजों को देखते हैं, और जो कम्युनिटी की जरूरत है, कम्युनिटी की जरूरत के हिसाब से हम अपने कामों को, अपने जो भी प्रोग्राम है उसको उस तरीके से हम डिजाइन करते हैं। दूसरा जो सत्येंद्र पूछ रहे हैं कि कॉरपोरेट सेक्टर और इसमें सोशल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में क्या अंतर है, या उसको टैलेंट को कैसे, तो देखिए ये तो अगर मैं ऐसे बोलूंगा तो थोड़ा कॉरपोरेट वाले बुरा मान जाएंगे या उनकी बुराई हो जाएगी। मतलब जिस तरीके से वो सिखाते हैं कि मतलब सीधी सी बात है कि आज आप आपको इवैल्यूएशन और मॉनिटरिंग की ट्रेनिंग है 2 दिन की, और तीसरे दिन सबको ये मान के चलने लगते हैं कि ठीक है, ये इवैल्यूएशन और मॉनिटरिंग में ये बिल्कुल बंदा परफेक्ट हो गया है। तो वहीं ऐसा है कि सोशल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में इस तरह की चीजें नहीं होती कि आप 2 दिन में तो सारी चीज सीख जाओगे। तो एक ये बेसिक अंतर है कि जरूर आप एक्सेल में चीजें सिखा सकते हैं, लेकिन चीजों को एनालाइज करना, चीजों को देखना, चीजों मतलब परिस्थितियों के प्रति अपने नजरिए को देखना, ये बड़ा अंतर है। और कैसे मतलब ये जो कल्चर है, कॉर्पोरेट होने का जो कल्चर है, तो हमारा एक अनुभव ये है कि ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का साइज एक थोड़ा छोटा रखेंगे तो बहुत सारी चीजें आसान हो जाती। आप ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के साइज को जितना बढ़ाते जाएंगे, आपको उतनी चीजें उतनी बढ़ानी पड़ेगी, फिर आपको अलग अलग डिपार्टमेंट चाहिए रहेगा, अलग अलग रिसोर्सेज चाहिए रहेंगे। हम सोशल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन बहुत ज्यादा फोकस अपने काम को छोड़ के अपने स्केल, अपने ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के स्केल के लिए ज्यादा चिंतित होते हैं। तो मुझे लगता है कि अगर उस चीज को थोड़ा सा हम समझे तो शायद चीजें ज्यादा आसान हो जाएगी।
Thank you, Amin ji. Yeah, Ravi, please.
Lopa, there is a, something that I've always believed while, looking for talent for the organization, and I feel is important in the way the organization also runs, is a phrase I picked up from my own, one of my colleagues long back, is this idea of insaniyat and kabiliyat. Otherwise you'll become a very corporate organization if you just focus on kabiliyat. I think insaniyat is a very critical component. And I think I might have said it earlier also. When you hire a person, you must hire for the skill that you're hiring, but you also have to hire for purpose. And that's super critical. If you've hired somebody who matches the skill, but doesn't really relate to the purpose of the organization, it will collapse in a very short period.
Yeah.
So,
and also there are some skills which can be learned over time and built over time. And every role does not require all the skills necessary to do the job well, but for the right culture fit is very critical, irrespective of how skilled that person is. So that's also something we always advise. Thanks a lot for sharing that. And in a younger organization, it's also critical because the first set of employees kind of pave the way forward for the DNA of what that organization believes it has and what it will have. Future employees look at that when they come and join certain sets of organizations. So as a younger organization, it's more pertinent that you are looking at culture and the kind of personalities you want to build something with. And there's a difference between a house and a home, right? So you want to build it with the people that you really value versus mason bhi banai deta hai na ghar to. You just need certain raw materials to build a house, but it is made a home when you have the right kind of people around you. So that's very critical, and it's critical everywhere. I think social sector organizations, there is a word social in the context that we speak, right? And social has that element of peopleness to what we believe in, and it can't be achieved in isolation. And what Ravi said, that I might be great at doing my work alone in front of a laptop, but I might be invaluable when it comes to working with different people, and having those conversations, and also believing in it in principle and not just in theory. I also feel a lot of organizations want a culture, but they kind of have it in a theoretical way in their head, but they are not able to implement it. So I think it's also having that dialogue as a team and talking about it more openly and transparently, versus uh, setting policies and strictly telling people आपको आना है office 3 days a week, or you can work from home 2 days a week, because it kind of loses the essence of what you really believe in. And sometimes I also feel organizations are very close to the end consumer, but they are further away from their own people. They are very passionate about farmers or women or children, but they tend to ignore the people around them. So I think those value systems need to match. And doing employee engagement surveys every year, you would be surprised what people write. And even a question like, do you really feel the founding team believes and lives the values of the organization that is mentioned in the preamble of the organization or the first slide of every deck? You would be surprised what employees think. And it's important for feedback too. So if you want a vibrant culture where people are heard, it's important that we also hear them.
Thanks, Ravi, Amin, and Rahul. Very interesting. There's someone here who's asked a question, Sahitya. Can we have him ask the question? Him or her, sorry. Hi, Sahitya, please go ahead.
Hi.
Hi,
Yes.
sorry.
Thank you for the insights so far. My question was largely around very specifically capacity building, right? For young orgs who are say 3 to 5 years old, 7 years old, L&D vertical is something that, again, like an HR vertical at times is non-existent, right? And while we have very much hired people remotely, believing in their potential, their talent, I think there is, because they're remote, they are unable to work with, alongside people, learn from people. So learning curves have been relatively flat, unless they are the kind of people who have high ownership, learning on their own, know how to learn, etc. So just want to know if any inputs on that, have there been trends around that? Yeah.
I can answer first and then maybe someone can come in. Saitya, thanks a lot for putting that question in, which is, I think it's a pertinent question for irrespective of how old you are or how young you are or how small you are. I think L&D as a concept needs very big revamping. It's not like a Benadryl that you take 2 spoons a day and cough will go away. A lot of times, I think organizations and leaders need to set benchmarks on every role. Like if when you are creating a role in your organization, you need to ask 2 things: what is this person going to do? But at the same time, what are they going to learn? And as we are thinking about associates, a senior associates, a manager, what are the skill sets they are going to build at every level? And then work backwards and constantly reiterate in every check-in, in every meeting that you have, one-on-ones, group meetings, that these are the competencies that you are working on. Yes, there are some personal competencies and personal learning and development goals that individuals might have. And that is something you as an organization need to take a call on, that how much can you help them or support them. And many a times it doesn't need to be a full-fledged L&D program. It might be 2 books that this person needs to read over a period of 12 months, or free courses available in the wider ecosystem that they can bring. Or you bring in people like Ravi in your I don't know, like we call that group town halls, where you can get eminent personalities from the sector to speak for 20 minutes. And even board interventions, right? There are great eminent board level members of organizations who can add so much value by even spending 15 minutes with your staff, talking about their journey of what social sector means for them. So I think it depends on individual to individual, but at an org level, you can definitely design and define what learning looks like for each level and what would learning competency mean when they get promoted or move up a level, and what is the role that you will play and what is the role you expect the person to play. Because tali do haath se hi bajti hai. You cannot create an L&D plan where you create the L&D for someone. And usually it goes for a toss where you create a learning and development plan for someone else. It usually is never imbibed upon and it just becomes a column in a spreadsheet. That's my perspective. Thank you.
And to add to what Rahul said, one thing we've tried is cross-pollination. So say there's 6 people in a team. Rahul's amazing at Excel. So we get him to actually do a 3 hours on, hey, this is your 15 Excel formulas you can use. I'm great at project management. Ravi's great at something else. So we found, but what the team did was create a 2-hour slot every 14 days where one person would show up and upskill the team. So just creating that rhythm, no HR was involved, nobody else was involved, team figure it out themselves. These are our skills. Where do we get them? Right. And the other thing we did, which was helpful, was we got a Scribed account. Scribed is like Netflix for books. It's about $700 a month. We bought one login because we're a cheap NGO, gave everyone the login and said, go use it. Right. And you literally have access to 100,000, 200,000 books there. So pretty much any book out there, people have access to an audiobook and reading wala book. So things like that, like you said, courses, all of that. But at a team level, we found that useful. You know, we're all our peers, we teach each other. Our manager also helps out, and then we keep moving forward.
Yeah, incidentally, in the other sort of study products in the talent study, learning and development was a huge driver for motivation. If you look at the second module of the study report, so even beyond what the cases found, that's a huge thing. Sorry, please, Ravi, over to you.
No, I first want to compliment Sahitya and her organization to have actually invested in L&D in such an early stage of their own sort of journey. The only point I want to make is that we shouldn't adopt L&D the way the corporate defines L&D. The corporates define L&D by treating the talent or the people working as a resource. And this resource need to deliver this, and to deliver this resource need to be able to do this. And that's one way of defining L&D. And I think that's a dangerous way. And I'm going back to the earlier point about hiring for purpose. You have to make, if you have a person joining your organization who's aligned to the purpose of the organization, the ownership of L&D also needs to be transferred. So then L&D is no longer the ownership of the L&D team. The ownership of the L&D is in the individual, but the L&D team plays a facilitating role and creates the opportunities, creates the scaffolding, creates the connections, etc., for the L&D process. Otherwise, it'll become the traditional, tick in, 3-4 skills that are required, and you completely lose it. The other point I have always said is there is no better L&D than actually getting out in the field. There is no better L&D than talking to your peer group and discussing, what you've been seeing from each other's perspectives. There is no better L&D than getting the entire organization into a room or an offsite and talking about, the various aspects required to participate in that. And eventually, like, Ajit and Rahul said, different people will bring different skill sets, and different people will then, there'll be an osmosis of those skill sets across the organization, and everybody else will build that. But I think we should think of L&D differently from how the corporate would think of L&D.
Thanks, Ravi. Shantanu, any insights on these 2 or 3 overarching questions that people have asked until now, and then we'll get to Shobhna and the other question that's been posted anonymously. But first to you, Shantanu.
Honestly, it's been covered pretty comprehensively. I don't think there's much that I could add.
Sure, fair. Okay, can we ask Shobhna to ask their question? Can we have Shobhna?
We're good to see their faces also.
Hi, Shobhna.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, hi. So I'm kind of just entering the sector thanks to Ravi and ISDM through the Women on Boards program. So Ravi, if you see me, you will recollect me from the cohort.
Yeah, I do.
So when you said that when you're recruiting people, they need to be aligned with the purpose of the organization. I mean, I've written it down also. So I mean, I think this would be applicable even for the corporate sector, not just for SPOs or NGOs. How do you assess if that person is aligned? Okay, you have your organizational values, you've defined it, this is what you want to do as a CEO, as an owner of the organization. But how do you understand it from especially a fresher or who's just entering, who's just trying to navigate and figure out what's going to work, what's not going to work? I mean, I know I took easily a decade or more to figure out what is it that I want to do after being through the regular grill of corporate sector. And I'm still figuring out, I won't say I'm very clear about it. So how do we go about with that?
Thanks, Shobna. Actually, incidentally, sorry, there's another question by an anonymous attendee who's also kind of asked a similar question about for an ex-entrepreneur to find a job in the sector. So perhaps if everyone can just help marry the two and kind of respond overall. Yeah, please, Rahul, over to you.
I think every organization has a certain set of values which you hold sacred. And based on those values, there has to be some level of evidences that a person, even though if they are a fresher, might have kind of experienced or something that kind of can help me describe if there's a replica in their previous avatars as a student or as a president of their societies or in college, if it's ability to take ownership of your work. I'm assuming asking those relevant questions in an interview or asking evidences of ownership as a key word are ways to decipher the value of ownership in a prospective candidate. But I also feel as a sector, we need to be kind of more open-minded, because I don't think there's a saying we say, a lot of organizations look for superwoman or supermen who are tick marking every category of the skill set that we would need. But I feel those are, and no disrespect here, I think if you hire supermen for every job, then it's the wrong job for them. Because I feel the perfect job for any candidate is when they know 60% of their job really well, but there are 40% which has a steep learning curve. And that's what will enable them to grow and continue with you beyond a year. Versus if you hire the perfect person for a job, the chances are they will get bored in a year. So highlighting what are the key areas that I would want to fix through this role that I'm hiring for, and what are the non-negotiables for that, right? It could mean prior work experience at a certain level or a certain internship, or key if social sector is a driving force for you, there has to be some instances that you would have picked up. It could even mean volunteering for an NGO during winters, especially in Delhi, where you helped people in the slums. It could just be some kind of activity which kind of explains why you applied for this job in the first place. But this question is not just for freshers, right? This is something we expect everyone at every level to bring in. Yes. Maybe at various levels, but I feel that we need to also be open-minded for people and not just look for supermen and superwomen for every role. And that's what we advise as Arthan too. There is a tendency for organizations to look at CVs and reject people. And it's also important to look beyond the CV, because a CV may not give you every evidence. But also, how much time do we have to speak to hundreds or thousands of people? So it's a sweet spot, right? And how do you balance both? I hope, Shobna, I came close to.
Yes, to some extent.
Shobna, are you asking, as a young person, I'm not sure of my purpose. How do I align my purpose to an organization's purpose or an organization's values?
Either ways, as an employer, how do you figure if the person is aligned?
As an employer or as a fresher?
As an employer, and even as an employee, when they are coming for as an interviewee, if they're coming, how are they going to be able to, am I aligned? I mean, what my purpose is? I mean, as a fresh 22, 23-year-old, I mean, they're high on life, they're out of college. And how do you say what your purpose in life is? I know there are some very clear candidates, but I mean, because I've seen it in the corporate sector. So they just come, they finish an MBA and they come and they get into the bank, and that's how the recruitment happens. You've done your MBA in finance and that's it, we take you, and that's what we do. So that's what I was trying to understand. And I was trying to see if there was some kind of course, there could be a lot of draws from this to the regular corporate sector as well. I mean, if organizations could actually hold on to their core purpose and show that as a leadership team, maybe things would be better in terms of employee journey, maybe.
Lopa, can I add to that? I don't know if we
Yes,
have time.
please.
Yes.
You know, Shobhana, in the corporate world, we do assess for value alignment. I don't think we assess as much for purpose alignment. And I'll give you, explain what I mean by that. So, you know, if you're hiring somebody, or if I'm joining a place, and if my passion for the work the organization, let's say the organization is working on women empowerment. And if women empowerment as a space doesn't, you know, make me feel either a discomfort with the status quo or a desire for a better world, I will lose interest there very quickly. That's the first level of purpose. The second level is the way you're going to work on that. You know, you could be working on it by saying, no, it's not about working with women, it's about working with men. It's about working with the education. It's about working with the rights. It's about working in different aspects. And you will realize that some things will be sweet spots for every person. When I listen to it, I feel, yeah, I like that. And unless that resonance happens, the work will become a chore. Now, in the banking world, it didn't matter if it was a chore because I anyway got paid my, you know, whatever bonuses if I did that chore well. Here, I'm not even paid so well. There are no fancy salaries, no fancy. So the excitement comes out of the resonance of, you know, that feeling of this is what I live for. This is what I like to do. But you're also right, Shobhana, that there are youngsters who float in saying, I don't know what I want to do. But what you will realize in conversation, there are things that bother them. You know, LGBTQ might bother them, environment may bother them, climate may bother them, the way children are treated may bother them, old people may bother. And there needs to be a resonance. And I've sometimes actually told youngsters, this is probably not the space you want to work in. You want to be looking at spaces like A, B, C, D. And I've even helped them to go meet such places, because that's the joy of being in this sector. This sector, the high is not going to come out of the money. The sector, the high is going to come out of that resonance between what you feel is right and the organization doing what you feel is right.
Thank you so much, Ravi. Thanks.
Thanks, Shobhana, for your question. And thank you, Ravi and Rahul and others for your responses. We're kind of almost at 5:30. That was the promised time. And Amin had to suddenly leave. There was some work that he had to attend to. But also, my colleague has added a feedback form for everyone to respond to, just for us to assess how this panel went, and for us to frame better panels and convenings for next time. But any closing thoughts, any sort of takeaways that any of you would like to share briefly before we sum up and close?
I'm just delighted that we are having these kind of webinars and discussing talent management as a topic. And today there are two webinars that ISDM itself is involved with, this one and another one on OD. And it's fascinating that the sector is having these discussions, you know, and that's just fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ravi. Yeah, Ajit,
Definitely
you were saying
agree.
something.
And Young India wants to work in this sector. I agree with Ravi. It is a space where a privileged few, you know, slightly upper middle class are the ones who are doing it, and they have some financial cushion, which enables them to work in the sector even at lower pay, right? We've definitely benefited from that. Hopefully, long term, we can up our pay scales so that anybody can work in our sector, right? And I know that's a journey we'll take as a sector also. So yeah, but glad we're having these discussions.
Thank you. I'm glad everyone feels this way, and thank you all for your presence. And just to let everyone know, we now have more cases on the talent study landing page. Our team has been working frantically to add a few more. Please feel free to peruse and download or reach us if you need any other insights that we got from the talent study. And we're really excited for the discussion that happened today. Our next convening on talent management is being planned for next month. That we hope to organize an in-person convening, and we'll be sending out event details soon. And we'd like you to stay tuned. We'd like you to sort of engage with us and reach us if you have any further inquiries or questions on this. Thank you once again, all our panel members. I know this was midweek and in the middle of the working day. Thank you so much, Shantanu, Rahul, Ajit, Ravi. Amin, we will thank separately because he had to leave. And thank you, everyone. And we hope you have a great evening and happy rest of the week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lopa. More women next time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.